You guys have certainly checked off one monumental box this year by getting back to the postseason, but I'm really curious about, holistically looking at this a little bit bigger in terms of building a sustainable winner, which you've talked about over and over again, and you guys have certainly made some moves this year to hopefully ensure that. Can you kind of talk a little bit about not so much this season, but at least, this maybe being the part of something special moving forward?
Yeah, I guess from the very start, anything you do from, as a player, as a staff member, as a front office member, it's just a series of small steps, and this is just the next step. And we always talked about the sustainability of the roster being the focus of what we were doing, and we have a fun young team. So many of the players that have driven this team all year long are young, or they're young veterans, or they're guys that are in the primes of their career and performing like players in the primes of their career. So I'm very excited about where it goes from here. If I just look at the weekend, when we played our clinch series or clinched the postseason last Friday night, it's Logan Gilbert, who's 25 years old, starts that game, and Matt Brash, comes in behind him, and Cal Raleigh hits the home run, and these are all young players that have essentially grown up in our system or been born there. And, you throw into that Julio Rodriguez and Jared Kelenic and the group of guys in our bullpen, any number of those guys, Andres and Penn Murphy and Matt Festa and Eric Swanson, who's sneaky been here a while, but still young. And the same is true of JP and Ty Crawford. It's such a young, fun team, and we think this is just the beginning of what we're capable of.
Jerry, Scott said the other day that Julio was born for the bright lights. He's made for the bright lights. When did you know that he reveled in these kind of moments, and what was there a moment where you said, okay, this guy can handle it, or this guy lives for this kind of thing?
I do think that it was pretty evident when he was still a teenager that he lived for these kind of things. It was, his first major league camp, I thought he showed up and really stood out, and he wasn't shy. He was very brash in how he went about it, and in a fun and good way. And I've said this not just about Julio, but about our team in general. These guys like when the light shines. Our team doesn't shy away when people turn to watch them play. They like that. And the more people, the better it seems we respond. And that's why I'm really excited or optimistic about how we show up in the postseason, despite the fact that we haven't done a lot. And Julio just has that gene. And I've told this story before, and I think you've heard me tell this story before. In spring training, when we were sitting in the dugout after, I think it was the very first BP session, and Julio was holding, the bat that he ended up using in the home run contest in Dodger Stadium, and I asked him to see the bat, and it's a pretty cool looking bat. It's kind of unique and the aqua or teal look to it, and I said, yeah, they made it especially for me. And I said, and then he turned around to me out of nowhere and he said, do you think I can play center field? I said, I think you can. He said, I love when people don't think I can do something. And I said, I don't think you can do 30-30, or win a Triple Crown. And he grabbed the bat back from me and he looked up and he said, all right, you're on. And I'll tell you what, if he didn't have a couple of setbacks physically, the 30-30 thing would have been a reality. He had a remarkable year. And he accepts every challenge, and when the light gets brighter, he seems to shine even more. So this I think is going to be the first of what are going to be many opportunities for him to shine in this environment.
Jerry, a lot of people have said the Mariners are a team that's built to win in the postseason. Do you agree with that, and how much of that is by design when you were building the team?
Yeah, I think it's all by design, if I'm being honest. You want to build a championship team, and when I got here, we had the base for a championship team. We had real power in our lineup. We had the star power at the top of the rotation with Felix, and then we had the stability and consistency with Kuma, and then the upside potential, guys like Pax and Taiwan. The year almost immediately thereafter, it really changed for us. We became more of a softer throwing, strikes-oriented pitching staff with an aging but powerful lineup that was a little bit more mercurial. This team, as we've developed through the minor leagues, as we've identified trade targets, as we've picked up this roster, which is entirely different than it was, those years ago. It's about power, and we have power arms throughout the rotation. We have power arms throughout the bullpen. We have power up and down our lineup. And if I had, we're not I would say a gifted bat to ball hit for average team, but I think people would be mildly surprised, if not shocked, if they looked and saw how often we walk and how frequently we homer. So in that way, we're a pretty modern offense. I think we're second in the American League in walks. We're one of the top 10 home run hitting teams in all of baseball. And the power is distributed throughout the lineup. We've got a bunch of guys that can hit out of the park. And then you've got the Luis Castillos and the Robbie Rays and the Logan Gilberts and the George Kirbys who can run out there and give you a chance to win with power, bat missing type stuff. And then a bullpen that can come in and do the same. So I do think that's the recipe in October is big time pitching with power arms and guys that can hit the ball out of the ballpark, because you're not going to string together many 5 or 6 hit innings in the postseason to generate those runs.
Jerry, Scott mentioned that you guys have kind of figured out what the roster is going to look like. You won't unveil it until tomorrow, but just how much goes into that? How much scouting, how much preparation, and how challenging is that, especially given some of the injuries that you've dealt with over the past few days?
Well, a lot of it was going to depend on who we were playing. The matchups were first and foremost. Player health, was next. We've been talking about this now for, in advance, truly, of clinching. We had been talking about the way the roster would look. And knowing that a 26-man roster, we were going to have 22 or 23 of those spots that are self-evident. They kind of take care of themselves if everybody's healthy. And then lo and behold, with the injuries to Hags and Wink, it wasn't as simple as you might think. The good thing is we got so much exposure for a lot of players throughout the season. Guys like Jared Kelenic and Taylor Trammell and Abraham Toro, who weren't with us all year long, did get a lot of exposure. So, we do feel like we have some depth to lean on. And, the biggest challenge for us was figuring out, who was going to be healthy and how best we would match up. And, Toronto is, they're tough, and they're a very right-handed team. From the starting rotation to the bullpen to the lineup, it's pretty right-hand heavy. And it's our ability to run right-hand pitching out there and try to balance the lineup with left-hand bats, is going to be the key to us competing in this series and hopefully coming out on the other side.
Jerry, Scott was just mentioning how last year's finish kind of motivated him and the players. For you, just considering the way the season ended last year, how did that factor into how you wanted to construct the team this year and what you're seeing the results of, so to speak?
I think the biggest thing was how excited our city was by the way our team played in 2021, and especially down the end as we were pushing to get into the postseason, and it was manic at the ballpark for that last homestand, especially the final weekend, and then when you took a breath and you look back and through all the excitement, you realize we're a really fun young team that has a lot of holes, and we had to go fill those holes, and that's the way we approached our offseason. Not by viewing our team as we're a 90-win team, we're naturally going to go out and improve. And we understood that we needed to go out and add to this team, and had those conversations with a handful of our players that had been around our club, had those conversations with the staff down in the clubhouse, and then we went out and did that thing. We added Robbie Ray, we added Adam Frazier, Gino and Wink came from Cincinnati in the spring once the lockout ended. And I think when Gino and Wink showed up in spring training, and many of you were there, our group took it. They went to a different place emotionally. The excitement on our team, the joy that they felt every day in spring training. They thought we had a playoff quality team on the field, and we were just trying to build off of that excitement that finished our season in 21. And I think that was the moment where our players knew that we were legitimately better moving forward, and they were excited and ready to do what we've now done. And I think once we picked up Luis Castillo and Matt Boyd and Casale at the deadline, we're further enforcing or reinforcing our roster. I think our players now believe we can go out and win the World Series, which is our goal.
Jerry, what can you tell us about Cade Marlow and his skill set and how he might fit in the roster construction here?
You know, Cade, he can play defense, he can run, and he hits. He's got power. He's a sneaky good prospect. He's consecutive years in the minor leagues. I think he's, you know, if he's not the only, he's one of the only players in the minor leagues to have back-to-back 2020 seasons. I think he's the only one to have 20, and 100 in terms of his RBI. And, you know, Cade is he does a little bit of everything. And, you know, this was an easy choice for us just based on the quality of his defense and the fact that he's a plus runner. And in the postseason, those are really key things to have in terms of, you know, bench impact. I don't know that you can make more impact off a bench than being able to put a plus defender out or someone who can go steal a base. And Cade can do those things, and he can also hit the ball over the fence. So pretty good player. We think he plays a part in our future, and this was as good a time as any to have him with us, whether it be as a taxi squad member or on the roster, because we think he has a skill set that can impact short series.
Jerry, just wanted to go back to the extension for Julio Rodriguez, and it's something that's been talked about here. I'm just wondering, for when your considerations, how much were you looking at market trends and how the industry was treating young players of his caliber in making that decision versus looking at it in a vacuum to your situation and the player specific?
I think it was more the latter than the former. You know, we're always cognizant of what the market's doing and trying to ride the trends. You know, since we started our roster redo back in 2018, we have been fairly aggressive in trying to, you know, either making offers or signing players to extensions, and we've been in some cases successful doing that. And you know, with Julio, we made the same decision. We want him to be around, and then the uniqueness of Julio, his talents, his personality, what we think the upside potential is. And it's funny, you know, he's in the midst of, I think he wound up having a 5+ win season at 21 years old, and he can get a lot better. And I don't think we've seen the best of what he'll do, and trying to create a contractual model that allowed him to achieve what he should rightly achieve, while we get the opportunity to keep him with the Mariners over the course of what we think is going to be a long and exciting career, was one of the coolest things I've taken part in my executive career, and I love that we got it done, because he is, I think, he's a game changer in a lot of ways, and it's not just on the field.
Was there any influence from Wander Franco, and could we get back to that compared to not necessarily to that way?
Yeah, some, you know, but I think as you could tell by the final on the contract, it needed to be more unique than that. And I you know, kudos to the Braves and Acuna for working on the deal that they worked on. Obviously, the Rays did theirs with Wander, who is, you know, pretty case specific. You know, they were always one of the top 2 or 3 prospects in the league as they came through. They're roughly the same age. They were in the same signing class, etc. You know, but at the end of the day, we did a deal for Julio that we thought, you know, it represented Julio, and that was important. Otherwise, we just weren't going to get it done. And I don't think a simple here's a base contract with a couple of options attached to it was going to work in this case. Because, you know, the belief was on both sides of the table. The belief was that we were dealing with the potential for something extraordinary because of his personality and a lot of his gifts off the field, in addition to what he does on the field.
Jerry, what's impressed you most about Luis since he's come over?
I love his personality. You know, first I love the fact that he, you know, sits at 98 with crazy movement, and he's got a wicked changeup and a slider that makes you miss. But you would never know when you're around Luis if he's hot or cold. You would never know if he's up by 5 or down by 5. His stability really brings. I think the fact that he goes by, you know, La Piedra, the Rock, is representative of how he operates. I think that is a crucial trait among, you know, the ace type starters, is that kind of buck stops here mentality, and he brings that to the table every day. And I think he's a great teammate. He's a quality person, and I love the fact that he rides the even keel. There seem to be no peaks and valleys with Luis.
Jerry, since JK's come back up this last time, it just looks so much cleaner, so much simpler. He said the genesis came by himself in a cage by himself, thinking about it. How important was it for you guys to be patient? He was putting up numbers, but wasn't making the changes you kind of wanted. It seems like he's a different player now and a more projectable player going forward for you than maybe he was 6 or 7 weeks ago.
I can't even express, and I've said this too, Jared. I'm so proud of him for what he's accomplished. And sometimes you have to get to that aha moment where, and it is oftentimes just you, sitting in an empty room or in a cage by yourself when you cross that bridge. He has, he's pounded his head against the wall for a couple of years now, trying to force his way over the bridge. And it's not easy to go from being a super prospect to a good major league player. And he's periodically shown us that. I think this version of Jared, his pitch selection, what he's doing with breaking balls, the way he's identifying off speed, how much easier he's approaching his swing and just visually looks in the box. And I think it's affecting him in a good way. And he's from an absolute raw results I guess perspective over the course of the last 10 days. His raw results have not been close to how good his process has been. And in years past, his results always exceeded his process. And now if we can get those two roads to cross, and I feel like we are one at bat away from those roads crossing. And I don't know that we have a player who has the ability to change what happens with the team in front of him any more than Jared, because of how gifted he is in his tool set. And now we see it coming together in a very different way than it had been before. And I'm really proud of him. He could go out and have a dynamic postseason and use it as a springboard toward becoming the big league player that he was always going to be, or he could just continue to adhere to a good process and excite us just as much, because this guy just turned 23 years old. There's so much baseball in front of him, and I can't express how proud I am.
The single the other day off the left, the breaking ball, 2 strikes, where I would imagine that was pretty exciting for you, not double runs.
Yep. It's just doing the little thing and not grinding, not trying to pull everything, using the field to hit. He had an opposite field homer the other day in Seattle that it was gone the moment he hit it, because when he hits a ball, it stays hit. Jared has that kind of power, but when you're grinding on the bat and you're overswinging and you're trying to pull everything, it doesn't really work that well. And what he did, he just eased his operation. And I think his emotional growth this year has been more than the rest of his Mariner career combined. His skill set has always been, that's why he's always been one of the top prospects in baseball. And right now he's grown so much emotionally, and his psychological approach to the game, the consistency and an adherence to a process that is going to work. It's not a matter of if he's going to figure it out. He now has the key, and he just has to turn it.
Jerry, when you were talking about Marlow, you talked a lot about his tools, but if he is placed on the roster, he'd be making his major league debut in the postseason, which is a unique situation. What have you seen from his makeup that makes you believe he could handle that pressure?
Cade's been a little older at every step. Some of that is by virtue of the fact that he was a senior when we drafted him. Some of it is by virtue of the fact that seasons were missed with COVID, et cetera. But pretty mature kid. Nothing really bothers him too much. He never gets too high, never gets too low. You spend any time around him, and he has that general vibe. If he is on this team when the game starts tomorrow night, he'll be nervous. There's no doubt. You're nervous if you come in playing for a team that's 20 games under in May. It's another thing entirely in a playoff series. But whether it was Wander Franco, whether it was Adalberto Mondesi a few years ago with Kansas City, now these are things you can do with players who can impact your game, especially when you're implementing them in a bench role. And we feel like Cade has the ability to do that, and he has the makeup to handle the stress of doing it when the stakes are the highest.
Anything else for Jerry? Thank you.
Thanks, guys.